It's almost February, man. It's pretty crazy.
Dude, it goes
Time
by
is
so
flying.
fast.
Yeah.
So
We
Good
must
morning,
be
fast.
getting
everybody.
older.
Welcome to
I know,
another
right?
Saturday live stream inside the Code Noobs group. Happy to have you all here today. How are you guys doing today? How's your week?
Good,
Ah,
Good,
good,
good.
good. Yeah,
It's freezing cold here.
it
It's
is
like,
freezing cold
well,
here
it's
too.
not, it's literally not freezing yet. It's like 45, but
Well, it's
that's
freezing cold for
cold
you though. I
for
mean,
South Florida. Yeah.
yeah.
My blood's not thick enough for this. Anyway, good morning. We have a pretty interesting topic today. I feel like this is one that maybe a lot of the people in the group may not know that they want to watch, but could be very beneficial, especially if you're just sort of getting into software development and curious about your future as a
I think it's a
developer.
really important topic in general, just because I think it's important to think about these things beforehand, because it's
Yeah.
easy to get like to do stuff for the wrong reason.
well,
Yeah,
this is
And
absolutely.
also a lot of the ways that you get started in web development. So you look at things like boot camps, like Udemy, like
Hmm.
universities. None of them are going to tell you this because their whole business model depends upon selling
yeah,
you their product, which is making you become a web developer.
and they
So
don't care what
this,
happens afterwards either. There's
mhm,
nothing. Like, they're not
no
following afterwards. They don't give a shit.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We want a bright future for everybody who's in this group,
Mhm.
whether that's in software development or not. Hey, Anthony. Hey, Chris. Hey, Randall.
Hmm.
Nice to see you guys in the comments there.
Anthony,
Um, yeah,
what's
I
up?
mean, I think let's just get into it. The topic of today is why you shouldn't become a web developer, right? And so many of these people, whether it's on YouTube or through boot camp or advertising, they're going to say, oh, yeah, absolutely. You should become a web developer. You will make tons of money. You will have to do barely any work. You get to stay at home all day or just, sit on a nice beach, drink a Mai Tai or a pina colada. And yeah,
Wow, you even said
just,
the N with the tilde on it.
yeah,
Yeah.
pina.
Yeah.
Very
And
nice.
just rake in the money, like no work here. You can become a web developer in just like a few hours. And we're
Well, it
here to
only
tell
takes
you that
24 hours to learn HTML, CSS, and
Totally anything.
JavaScript. I saw that on a
pretty
Anything.
book.
Yeah.
much, pretty
Yeah.
That's
much.
all
I
they need.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I think the problem with that too? I think the boot camps and there's all these things that are like learn in 24 hours or learn in 7 days or whatever they are. It also sets people up for failure anyway, because they think then
Yeah.
I don't get it this
False
quick.
expectations.
Yeah, right? Like
Yeah.
I haven't mastered Python in 24 hours. I must be an idiot or I must not have the knack for this or whatever. And I think it totally is problematic in that respect as well.
That's it. That's actually one of the reasons that I had not to become a web developer is that you expect immediate mastery or you expect to learn
Mm,
this
Yeah.
stuff quickly. And I was the same way too, because when I started learning, I was like, oh yeah, like what's it going to take? Like a few months or a year or something like that? And it's like, no, the better answer is like 5 to 15 years, and that's probably what you're looking
Well,
at.
and the real answer is if you
yeah.
want to be a good developer, it's forever. You're going to keep
Mm.
Yeah.
learning new things. You're going to keep, because this stuff changes way faster now than it ever has. And I assume that pace is only going to increase, with changes and developments. I mean, quantum computing will eventually come out too, and that's going to change things significantly, It's going to
Yeah.
add a whole new level of
I mean,
stuff.
I think at this point, if you want to become a developer, you're going to see that technology moves faster than you can learn it for the most part. Like, there's just always going to be more coming out and new tools, new AI, new like everything faster than you could possibly ever learn it. But I think one of the things that I think is important that we don't talk enough about, or when I say we, I mean like all of the YouTube channels and the Udemy and the boot camps, is really like your motivation for becoming a developer. Because here's a reality: everyone wants to paint this picture that learning software development is a really easy thing. Like anybody can do it and it takes almost no time. The reality is, it's actually quite the opposite. And that's not to say that not everybody can do it. I mean, it's certainly anybody can learn the basics of web development and software development. But to become like a really good web developer and compete in the marketplace, it does take a little more than just like knowing how to turn on a computer, right? You need some
Yeah.
in-depth knowledge. And it does take a while to learn that. And one of the biggest things that I like to really enforce with people is that you're going to run into setbacks. You're going to run into walls. You're going to find bugs. You're going to feel discouraged. You're going to have imposter syndrome. And for me, I think it's important that when people hit those traps, we'll call them, you have some way of like lifting yourself up out of that. And to me, that comes out of the motivation of why you actually want to become a web developer.
No, I
Go
think
ahead,
that's the
Danny.
motivation is crucial too. I think that you're dead on. And because the other side of it too, I think, and Anthony sort of touched on this and what he said in his comment as well, which is like I think being a web developer now too, like especially like freelance and stuff, you're wearing many hats. You're not just like
Yes.
you're also doing design, you're also doing
Yeah.
planning, you're also doing all these other things. So you have to really have motivation and like what you're doing or love what you're doing to stay motivated and stay at it. Otherwise, it's going to be horrible and you're not going to do good work. I mean, there's tons of crappy developers out there. I mean, we all know
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah. And I think,
You
go ahead,
you
Randall.
mentioned coming up against obstacles, and that's something that's going to happen throughout your whole career, all the freaking time. And if you don't
Yeah.
want to
yeah,
encounter obstacles, web development probably isn't for you, because that's literally
Yeah.
all it
pretty
is.
much the definition of your job is just overcoming obstacles. But as you
Yeah.
were saying that, one thing that I thought of personally that's been very helpful is just us meeting up every week. And
Hmm.
us meeting up every week has expanded into Code Noobs and not only
Yeah.
just the group on Facebook, but also the Web Dev Incubator. So people who are more interested in getting more in depth and learning and developing more. But it's a great way to keep coming back because then it doesn't matter if you get knocked off the horse. Because guess what? You're
Yeah.
meeting up once or twice again that week and you
Yep.
can get right back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. And I just want to touch upon Anthony's point again, because I think it is really important, right? Is years ago when web development wasn't as prevalent and like it was just sort of in its infancy, there wasn't AI and all these tools that you could use. Uh, a lot of different people with different skill sets had to come together to build an app or whatever it is. And so you had tech companies that popped up, right? And that's sort of how software development happened, and that still
We had
happens
people that
nowadays.
specialized in HTML or CSS,
Right,
or,
exactly. You
that
had
was
front
pretty
end
much all you
developers, back
had.
end developers, like
Yeah.
everything. And we still have that. That's not to say that we don't, but um Charles checking Inye. Hey Charles.
Right?
um but we had that like for years, and we still do, where there's software companies that have a team of developers. But if you're just getting into this now, it's going to be difficult for you. Like I want to be the one to bear the harsh news of like it's going to be difficult to go from like I just know HTML to like you landing a job at Google. That's just not going to happen,
Well,
right?
it's
At
interesting
least in a
because
short period of time.
it's more difficult than ever, and it's also a little bit easier than ever. Because there's so
Yes.
many tools, there's so many programs, there's platforms, sandboxes, all this stuff is already set up for you, but there's just a lot more competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Anthony made a good point too, is when you're starting out as a web developer, you actually have this quite amazing advantage right now is number one, you have AI, which can basically make you like a mid-level developer in no time. Like you can prompt it and get really quality code out of it. But two, you know, as somebody who's just getting into this field, you have this benefit of actually being able to build real things on your own from scratch, like and
Yeah.
do the whole stack, right? Like you can do the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, all of it in one by yourself, test the code, put it out there. But I think he makes a good point is that you can do this and you can actually make a lot of money doing that, more than many developers make working a full-time job. However, it takes a little bit more skill set than just development. Like you need to have some skills in marketing and ad placement and all these different pieces of how business runs. And so, it's
And
a
actually,
double-edged sword, but yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
want to get started and know exactly how much you can make in a year, we went over all of that in last week's live stream. Kickstart your web
Mhm.
dev career
Yeah.
with low code solutions. So take a look for
Yeah.
that, and maybe we'll post a link for it in the comments so you can take a look at that because we went over all of it, and it is more possible now than ever to really start working for yourself and start making good money as a web
Yeah.
developer right off the bat.
And the
Well, I think
reality
that,
is you can earn money while you're learning, right? You can very
yeah.
easily earn hundreds, thousands of dollars per project that you work on. And they're not that hard to get. I mean, a lot of companies just need a simple website and they're willing to pay somebody to do it because they just don't want to spend the time or have, and they don't have the skill set to even work with low code solutions. So, yeah, it's a great recommendation.
I didn't know what
Go
they're
ahead,
looking
Danny.
for. Yeah, it's funny too because I think this is one of the coolest times to be in development because you can do so much as an individual. Like like before, it would have taken so much longer for one person to put together a full stack app. Like, I mean, seriously, it would have taken
Oh, yeah.
so much work and so much knowledge of different technologies and stuff. But I think what people forget too is getting into this is it's not just learning the, like you mentioned, right? You need other skill sets like marketing and stuff, but it's not just learning, the tech skills itself. It's also understanding the broader picture, how everything fits together. It's understanding, how these things work, finding problems. There's a lot of stuff involved that takes a lot of time as well. And, it takes a lot. Sometimes you have to learn those skill sets also. So you need to like kind of prepare yourself for quite a bit as you go
Yeah.
on this journey.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys, like, if let's say I am a complete noob, I just joined the group, I am just got interested in web development, what would you say I like? Are there some questions I can ask myself or some sort of practice I could do to see like, is this right for me? Or what do you qualify as, the best candidate to become a web developer? Go ahead, Randall.
Well, so there are some like, clear like yes or no type of things. Like, do
Hmm.
you enjoy sitting in front of a computer for long periods of time?
Yeah,
Because
that's a
if
good
your
one.
if your dream job is working outside and like walking around doing something, development is
That's
not for you. Like
No.
yeah,
you may be able to
that's
do
a
that on
huge
your
one.
breaks, but you're going to spend a lot of time in front of your computer. If you another easy one is what like how do you handle problems? Because you're literally your day-to-day job as a web developer is just encountering problems that you don't know how to solve and then figuring out how to solve them. And then that'll cause more problems and you'll have to solve that too. Uh, and then another thing is, I think it's an important thing is would you do it if you didn't get paid for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
That's a
And I
really
huge
good
think
one.
question.
I think
I
I
think that
think
hits the
it's
nail
not
on the head with
only a web
motivation.
development thing, but just kind of in terms of any job. Like any job that you have out there, would you do it if you didn't get paid for it? Because that'll tell you your motivation. Like, yeah, you can make a lot of money with web development, but it's not like you're getting that money for free. You're putting in a lot
Yeah.
of work and you're doing stuff that other people don't know how to do or aren't willing to do in order to make that money. So if you would do it for free, then yeah, go for it.
No, I think that's a
Yeah.
really good way to look at it is like, what is, are you passionate about it at all? Because I think the people that are passionate about it, like, especially like, we know a lot of people like in the group, right? And ourselves, we're all people that like love tech our whole lives, but just for whatever reason, never got into it early.
Yeah.
And you see, because like that love is still there, that passion is still there. So I think asking yourself the why, and Anthony was as well, like, asking yourself, why do I want to do this? But ask yourself like the why, like many times to get down to
Yeah.
the real bottom line of why is this important to me? Is it because I'm passionate about it? Do I love it? Am I interested in creating things? Or am I just trying to earn money? Because there's other ways to earn money.
Yeah.
And they might
Like,
align more with your skill sets or with your interests or with what you like. I mean, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't like what you do, you're not going to do it well and you're not going to stick with it. I mean,
yeah.
that's just a fact.
I think that's huge. I mean, that's something that I hear quite frequently in the action calls that I have when I ask people like
Yeah.
what makes you want to become a developer? And they're like, "Oh, well, there's good money and time freedom, stuff like that." And those are true, but the reality is you can make great money and have time freedom in lots of different roles nowadays. I mean, there's people who like, you know, are on TikTok and sell farts for a living and make $500,000, right?
Yeah.
So you can make money doing a lot of different things. We have this sort of amazing thing, in this generation where we're able to connect to people all over the world through this thing called the internet, which we're talking on right now, right? And you can make money doing pretty much anything that you want. There's people who have, $1 million a month businesses selling candles online, literally candles. So if
Yeah.
you're more passionate about candle making than you are about sitting in front of a computer, that's a huge red flag, right? Like if you don't like being in front of a computer, if you struggle every time that you get on a computer, or you're constantly asking somebody to help you on a computer, it's probably not the right fit for you. If, however, you're the opposite, if you're the person that people go to when they have issues with the computer, that to me is a green flag, right? Because that means that you have a deeper understanding of computers, you have this knowledge and passion, and people look at you as an expert already, even if you don't understand, coding. I mean, that was for me when I was basically my whole life, well before I understood how to code websites. Everybody I knew would ask me to solve tech, and I always felt like I understood tech. In fact, there's like a funny meme um, that's like, hey, I like somebody asking for help, and then it's like the IT guy comes and they're like, and it's fixed, and he's like, my job here is done, right? And that's like a lot of the reality here is, yeah. Are you laughing at Bryce because he's saying
Yeah.
his family's unpaid
Yeah.
tech support?
Yep,
Yeah, like
exactly.
if you can agree with that statement that you're your family's unpaid tech support, then you probably should become a developer. But if you don't, if you're the guy or girl who's like going to somebody else in your family to help you with tech related problems, this probably isn't the right fit for you.
I also want to go back to what you said too
Yeah.
about like you made a good point about, if you like, if you run into problems, are you actually like interested in solving them yourself too? Because I think this is
Yeah.
a big problem for a lot of people. Again, so we saw this in our boot camp with a lot of the people that were in our group. Like
Yeah.
so many of them didn't understand technology and they
Just to
were
be
afraid.
specific, you're talking about the boot camp that the
The
three
boot
of
camp
us
that we,
took,
yeah, that
not
we
the web
took,
dev
not,
incubator.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a boot camp. Yeah. So, when we were in that, I remember there was a lot of people in there who like they didn't understand technology, they didn't know how to use a computer, and they were afraid to do anything on it. Like
Yeah.
afraid. And it's like
Which
Plus, they
is
didn't know how
that,
to search Google, and
yeah.
they weren't, and like a lot
yeah.
of times people aren't willing to use AI because they're like, oh, I don't want to. What'll
Yeah.
that shit? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, that's all, I mean, that's all development is solving problems. And you need to get
Yeah.
comfortable learning how to find solutions on your own, knowing where to go to find them. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work. And it takes I mean, especially if you want
Yeah.
to do it quickly. Like I know when we started and we were learning originally, like I did so little that year in terms of going out and doing it. All I did was I was working my job and basically learning how to code. That's basically all I did. I cut everything else out to do it as quickly as possible and to be good at
Yeah.
it. And you have to have that kind of commitment, I think.
But guess what?
Well, I
You're still working your job as a developer now and learning to code. So things don't
Yeah.
yeah.
change. Like
Nope.
Yeah.
that's an important point because I go to a co-working office just to get out of the house, and so a lot of people there, like I'll talk with them and they'll be like, "Oh, so how's that course? You done learning now?" And every time I'm always like, "I'm never done learning. Like it doesn't end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finished that course, but like I'm
It
still just
opens up more things,
yeah,
right? It's like,
exactly."
Well, it's a funny
yeah.
idea too that people think like I guess a lot of people think that way too, that you learn a certain thing and then you just go do it, but you never need to learn anything else again. And it's like that is like to me that does not sound like a good life, in my opinion. Like I like learning. And I think that should be
Yeah.
an essential component to this. Like you should like learning stuff if you're going to do this long term.
It's really the only way you're going to be able to hold on to your job for longer than like 10 years. Because if you
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
something after a decade, it's like out of date completely.
For
Well, not
sure. And
that
in
too. If
this,
you're
it's
willing to
much
learn,
less.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you're willing to learn too, if somebody asks for something and you maybe don't know that technology, but you know other ones, you can say, yeah, I can do it because you can learn it, right? You have the confidence, you have the capabilities to figure it out, and you're willing to do it. That's the important thing too.
Yeah. I have another point that I think is really worthwhile thinking about for people who are getting into this. And this comes also from a lot of the action calls that I have with developers who are interested in joining the web dev incubator. I talked to somebody this week and they're like, yeah, I don't work a job. I'm just trying to become a developer as soon as possible so I can get six figures. And the reality is, like, I think your time horizon matters a lot, right? Because
Yes.
a lot of people come into this thinking, like, okay, this will be a quick way for me to make money. And like it's possible, right? You can do that with low code solutions, but it's not a quick way for you to get a job, right? Like one of the things that he asked me is like, what should I do first? Because I asked him, are you currently working? And he's like, no. And he's like asking me how much it is and all this stuff. And I was like, look, the first thing that you need to do before anything is you need to get a job because the reality is like you may want to become a web developer, but that's probably not going to happen for you for at least like a year. Like realistically, I mean, 6 months to a year is very realistic at at junior level, and then putting in a lot of time and energy in learning.
Well, I was gonna say if you
That's
put
how
in
long it's going to
a
take.
lot of
Yeah, like
time, yeah.
you need to put in a lot, right? Because it's a lot of learning. And the I think one of the things too that a lot of new or aspiring developers don't realize is that learning to code or learning software development is not as easy as just reading a book, right? Like we equate a lot of times we equate education and learning to just like reading something or digesting some information. But the way to learn software development is not like that. It's not just reading a book. It's both reading in the learning and then taking the action of trying to do this stuff on your own, because what we lose in this is that every project you ever make will be different, right? You'll be using a different tech stack. All those tech stacks interact differently. They're at different version levels than whatever you learned, right? Because there's a new version every day. And so, yes, you need to read the books to learn, but whatever you're reading, when you go to put it down in VS Code, is not going to work as easy as it looks in a book, right? And so, there's more to it than just like reading a book at, like, we went to school and they're like, just read the book and then we take the test afterwards. That's not how it works, right? Like you actually have to practice, like
Well, because
literally
it's a
practice.
practical skill, right? It is a
Right,
practical skill that
exactly.
you put into practice, and I think that you're right. Like you have to practice it all the time, and you have to keep at it. It has to be consistent so that you keep developing that muscle memory and those skills. It's a
Yeah,
lot harder than people think. And I think, like you said about the time horizon, it takes longer too than people think because you have all these places out there that have marketing teams that are trying to get people to spend their money on their stuff, convincing them, right, that it takes 6 months. We'll teach you 47 technologies. You'll come out of here and you'll get a job. It's like, no, you won't, because you won't know anything about those 47 technologies except the
right.
very basics, if you even remember how to start anything with it.
Here's another one. Uh, Web development might not be for you if you don't work well with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, any
we
job.
Yeah, really any job. But
yeah,
yeah.
right.
A lot of this
But
does apply to everything. I mean, it just
No,
depends on,
it's true.
some people think they're like, I hate people. I don't want to deal with people. I'll work on
Yeah.
computers. And it's like, to a certain degree, you can do that, but it's only going to get you so far. Because you're going to
Yeah.
have to, if you're working for yourself, you're going to have to interact with clients. If you're working on a
Hmm.
team, you're going to have to work with other people on the team. You might do the front end, they might do the back end or DevOps or whatever stuff going on. So like no
Yeah.
matter where you go, you're going to have to work with other people. And if you think that getting into web development is going to get you out of interacting with other people, you're in for a sad reality.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I don't want to just completely discourage everybody who's listening to this because uh
I
there,
noticed we just lost 1.2 thousand members.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Um, but I think for anybody who doesn't fall into any of these categories, there is a very bright future for you as a web or software developer, right? If you've been answering all these questions as like, well, I guess I should be a developer because I do love learning. I am the person in my family who everybody goes to. I do have a longer time horizon. If you're answering these questions, then that's awesome, right? You're in the right place and you have a bright future ahead of you. And one of the cool things about web development is that, yes, it does take some time in the beginning to get good at it. But once you get to a certain level, then it's off to the races and you can really do anything you want, right? And you get to this point
That's a
where,
cool point where you realize you can do anything because
yeah,
everything becomes possible and you're not afraid to try those things either, which is awesome.
exactly. Yeah. And then you start seeing like the world as an opportunity, right? Because you start seeing, oh, I want to do this thing. I have this great idea for an app. And look, there's like this amazing library that lets me do that. Or, like I was watching a video yesterday on YouTube about a software developer who makes, two to $300,000 a year coding bots, right? And he just codes like bots for companies where he'll use a library called Puppeteer, which basically allows you to interact with an internet browser or like a web page programmatically. And so he builds bots for companies, right, to help them. There's just so many different ways that you can be a web developer and make a lot of money doing this in ways that like interest you, right? Um, and so if you,
Continuing on that
yeah,
subject, Russ,
yeah,
uh, it's cool because where most other careers you're limited in terms of the time that you can put in. web development is
Mhm.
one of the most highly leverageable or highly scalable careers because you can write a web
Yeah.
application once and then you can sell it millions and millions and millions of times and
Yeah.
you don't have to do anything.
The other thing I would say
Absolutely.
too that's awesome about it, and it's one of the things that drew me to it as well, was that, it's a field where you can keep learning and you can do different things. All it takes is learning something
Yeah.
else. Like, whereas, like, I think a lot of careers, once you're in them, you are pigeonholed and you're stuck in whatever position you're in.
Yeah.
And there's very little room to be creative or to do new different things or to
And
try stuff, even if you want to, right? And I think with web development, you have this freedom to do anything basically that you want.
yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, a lot of careers seem like they have a lot of potential for growth. Many of them don't, but most of them do. But there is always sort of like a ceiling at some point, right? Like I've found myself in that in sales where I was like, I got really good at sales, and then my managers didn't want me to do anything but sales because I was good at it. And they're like, we don't want you to like become, a C-level executive or anything like that. They're just like, we just want you to do sales because you're good, right? And
Yeah.
that's it. And you get pigeonholed, like you said. Whereas in software development, if I ever got to a point where I was working for a company and they're like, you're just really good at doing this one thing, that's all we ever want you to do. Great, I can do that, but on my spare time, I can also build my own company or do a million other things because literally tech is pervades like
Everywhere.
every aspect of
Yeah.
life, and like it's really impossible to see a ceiling for tech, right? The ceiling is your Mark Zuckerberg. That's the ceiling for tech,
Yeah.
right? Or Elon Musk, and that's not really a ceiling because
Or
that
you
means
could
like you're
become
an
the programmer
innovator.
who's programming the matrix we live in.
You could, yeah. I mean,
There
I
you go.
guess like you could just create your own world.
Mm,
Think
Literally.
about
true.
that one. Let that
Yeah.
one sink in a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I just think there's so much potential in software development, but it's definitely not for everybody. And we've seen that inside the group too, because we've had people who've come in here with this expectation of like, I'm gonna be a amazing developer in a couple of months and be making millions of dollars. And the truth is they're not. And sometimes life gives you those lessons of like, hey, if you struggle to like open a web browser or open VS Code or open files on your computer, it's probably not for you because the learning curve is going to be much steeper for you than other people. And you're
Yeah.
just
Or
always going to be sort of lagging.
you're gonna need a
Yeah.
lot more time, right, to put in. I think Bryce also makes a good point, which is it's also a field that, like, this field also allows low startup costs. Like, you can build something
Yeah.
by yourself at home where all you're putting in terms of money is your time,
Yep.
And your
and
computer.
that, yeah, and your
Yeah.
computer, and that's it. I mean, so there is like a lot of
And you,
potential, untapped potential, I think, and it's just a matter of, that you really want to do it. Because that's the end of the
yeah.
day, you're not gonna do if you're just doing this for money and stuff, you're gonna fail at it, you're gonna get frustrated, you're probably gonna quit. If you're
I
doing
mean,
this because you love
I
it,
would
you'll
say
stick with
that
it.
too about like anything. I mean, I think
Anything.
that's like
Yeah.
a good lifestyle hack. If you're doing anything just for money, then you probably don't actually understand your true why, and you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. Because the
Yeah.
reality is, if you look at the most successful people in the world, they never did it for the money. Mark Zuckerberg wasn't like, hey, I'm going to be a tech billionaire. Like, that wasn't his intention. He was like, I'm going to make some cool thing, like some cool tool, and
He
people
was
will
trying to
use
make
it.
friends.
Yeah,
That's what he was
like
trying to do.
he's still struggling with that,
Yeah.
but he's got a lot of money now. So,
I guess
um,
that means I should shut down my OnlyFans page because
Yeah.
I was just going for the money.
yeah,
Uh,
there's Grinder for that if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But
bingo.
anyway,
The
yeah, I
cool one
mean,
more
I
cool
think
thing about web development is you get in what you put out. Or like
yeah,
what you're willing to put into it, you get out of it. So
Yeah.
like if you
yeah,
put in the work and if you stick with it for a long time, you're gonna get a lot out of it. But you
yeah,
have to be willing to stick with it and to put in the time.
yeah. I think that's a good point. And you do like I think as you put in effort into web development, the output becomes exponential, right? So
I was
like in
just
the
yeah, it's like
beginning,
that first year is the hardest, but you hit that point where like things get
yeah.
easier and everything starts to speed up and get faster. Like,
Yeah.
And
Well,
and you
because it's
need to
all
get like
interconnected, right?
yeah.
yeah, you need to at least hang in long enough to where it clicks. Because in
Yeah.
the
Right.
beginning, like it just all of it doesn't make sense because you're just seeing all this stuff from people doing
Yeah.
stuff where they already understand all of it. But it
Hmm.
takes a while, and once you get to that point where it clicks, then it's just like Ah, okay. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now you're cooking with gas.
it's interesting that you said that because there is a definite moment too, right? Like I know
Oh
that
yeah.
we've dealt that, we see that in the incubator too, and you can actually see it on people's faces, which is one of the things that I love the most about having this group is that like we get to see the students inside the program go from like this is batshit crazy. I don't understand what's going on here to like, you just literally see it. There's a moment where they're like, oh, and then everything opens up, right? And I think that's one of the coolest things is like once you get to that point, then everything you're just layering on top of that, and it's literally exponential. Every moment that you're like working in web development, after that, you're like, oh, I can do this now. Oh, this connects to that. Oh, that's how that works. And all of a sudden, the whole world wakes up, right? Um, I don't know what Bryce is saying, but Next.js, I guess he's agreeing that
That's where he
he
struggled. Yeah.
feels this way. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that's we see that a lot when we work in frameworks, right? Because frameworks abstract away
A
a lot of
lot.
the things that you've
Yeah.
already learned. So you're like going back to square one when you're like, oh, I learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then you go to a framework and you're like, whoa, this is not what I was learning. But then, same thing, you get to the point where you're like, oh, this all makes way more sense. And then everything's easier, right?
Well, that's, you know what it is too. You realize, and I think it takes that motivation, that love of learning and doing it and wanting to try things and get out of your comfort zone. But you do hit that point too where you realize that all this is connected. It's all fundamentally the same. And moving from
Yeah.
one thing to the other is not a big deal. It's syntax. It's a
Yeah.
little bit different in how it's written, but ultimately you're doing the exact same things because it's working the same way.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest feelings to have as a new developer is when you get to the point where you've learned enough code that you can now look at some other, particularly like
Yeah.
JavaScript for me, where you can see somebody else coding something and you're like, oh, I actually understand every line that they're writing, and it all just like connects. You start to see how the big picture is all put together,
I
which is
also
one of
like
the
too how
coolest
even when
feelings.
you see code like of a language you don't know, you can still read it and
Right.
understand it enough to
Yep.
like understand what's going on. Yeah, it's really cool because it's all simple logic and simple things put together to make a complex
Yeah.
object. Yeah.
Yeah. And really that's like the core of it is that bigger understanding. I was actually um, reading a Reddit post yesterday about somebody who works at Amazon and they were giving suggestions of like how to get through like the interviews. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is he was talking about how when they do the coding interview, like the tech part of the interview, they don't actually run your code. Like it's just in a text editor. And he was like, honestly, they don't really care that you have all the syntax perfect. They just want to see your mentality and understand that you can go from like seeing what the problem is to working through the steps and getting there. And he's like, they literally just have you type your code in like just a blank like Google Docs, and they don't want to run it because they just want to see like, yeah, this makes logical sense, like how they thought through this. And that's the reality as a web developer and any developer is that you don't need to memorize all this stuff. What's more
We're looking for
important is that you
problem solving.
understand, yeah,
Yeah.
you get the problem solving and you understand the bigger picture of how it all connects together. Um, and so I think that's one of the cool things is like you can learn one technology and then once you learn JavaScript, Python's easier, Java's easier, like C++ is
Yeah.
easier. They're all easier because you understand the core of it. And so again, it's just exponential. Once you like cross over that barrier of this all doesn't make sense to me, then it's on. Then you can really do anything. And then you just add skill sets, right? Then you add a little bit of marketing and Facebook
Yeah.
ads and things like that. And then all of a sudden you can build your own apps where you can make, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing pretty much nothing, just maintenance, right? Minor maintenance on an app.
Yeah, so if you've been watching this and we haven't dissuaded you yet, and you're looking to
We've been trying hard.
yeah. And you're looking up to level up your web development career, get out of tutorial hell, and really move forward this year. We do have a program for that. It's called Web Dev Incubator. It's a group that we select of people who are highly motivated to become web developers. And basically, in months, you can really level up your
Yeah.
coding ability to where you feel comfortable working for yourself, applying for those jobs. building your
Yeah.
own passion projects, whatever it is. So if it is something that you're interested in, write web dev down in the comments below, and we'll reach out to you.
Yeah. I
I would
mean, I
also
want to
add
say
too,
this.
because we
This
see,
is
I wanted to add something on real quick,
go
because we
ahead, go
see it
ahead,
all the
Danny.
time too in the incubator too, which is, I think that the community there too, and the support you get from the community and just interacting with others, you see people progress so much faster than they would have on their own, and
Yeah.
grasp things so much better than they would have on their own, because you're getting it from a lot of different perspectives, and you have other people struggling through the same things, and you're seeing how it's really done rather than like watching tutorials, watching these things that, don't give you a good impression of what web development's really like or what development's really like.
Well, look at the
Yeah.
compare Web Dev Incubator to what we went through in our boot camp, where we paid
God.
probably 5 to 10 times as much for our boot camp. But like the web dev
If not
incubator is only
more.
like the best students from the boot camp because most of the people in the boot camp they were just sitting there. They were like, "Oh, I'll get this degree and then I'll be able to apply for jobs wherever," and they get nothing out of it. They don't do any of the work. But like the actual good students, that's basically what web dev incubator is. The ones who want to do something with their
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to say the web dev incubator is basically the committed community that is missing from every program that's out there, right? There's a million ways out there to learn how to code. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Udemy, you can go to Free Code Camp, Code Academy. There's a million of them. There's boot camps, there's university degrees, but they are all missing this one piece, which is the community, right? Which is like we don't exist in isolation as human beings. We don't, right? That's why we have language, because without language, we would just exist in isolation. And so if you're trying to learn on your own, you're just simply doing it the wrong way. That's not how learning is meant to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's why we built this web dev incubator, because it is a community where you can share your experience, what you're going through, what you're learning, what you're struggling with, and have a community that can support you on your goals and make sure that you follow through in what you're doing. And so if that's something that you want, if that's something that you feel like you need, you've been struggling, you've been sort of on the fence, you've been in isolation, learning on your own, feel like you're just not getting this stuff, or you just wish you had somebody who understood what you're doing and somebody you could ask questions to, that's why we developed this program. So if that's you, if you feel like, hey, I probably should join this, we'll absolutely do an action call with you, which is basically just some free mentoring. We explain to you a little bit more about what's inside the web dev incubator.
Talk about your
Who's it
motivation
for?
too.
Figure
Yeah.
out your motivation, ask a lot of these questions, right? Like that's a lot of the questions that I ask people inside these action calls, like why do you want to become a developer? What's in it for you, right? And they're questions that a lot of people actually don't think about until they get on that call, which may seem surprising, but the reality is we all have shiny object syndrome, right? We hear about, oh, I can earn tons of money and work just a few hours a week and do all this stuff. And we want to give you a dose of healthy, reality. But this can be something that you can really make a lifetime out of and really enjoy yourself as a web developer. So if that's you, if you feel like, hey, I'm interested in joining this web dev incubator, drop it in the comments or just reach out to us on Facebook. You can also head over to codenoobs.io, check out what we have in there. Yeah, and we'll get you inside the program. But with that, do you guys have anything else that you want to share today? No?
No.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone in the comments for hanging out with us. You guys always share great content that we can sort of bounce off of as well. So if you are inside the Web Dev Incubator, we'll see you in about 20 minutes. The link will be inside the Telegram group. And awesome to see you too, Anthony. Haven't seen you in a while. Robert, I promise I'm going to get you in soon. We're actually rebuilding the platform, so I'm just waiting to get the new people in once we do that.
That'd be
Um,
awesome.
but yeah, thanks again for everybody tuning in and keep up the good work. And we'll catch you next week for another live stream.
Later, guys.
Later.
Peace.